Hello, hello. You are listening to the Accelerator podcast. I'm your host, Lara Cooper. The name of the podcast, the pun is intended, but it's not that creative. I know it's just my name that's in the middle of it. Today we have a very special guest, a really good friend of mine, Alex Ratynski from Searchable Incorporated. And he's going to be talking to us about the value of having a niche in your business. And if you don't know what that is or haven't identified it yet, that's okay. We'll talk through it. Thank you for joining, Alex.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So when we were planning out this podcast, we were talking about some good icebreaker questions. And some of my go-tos are, how do you take your coffee? What do you have for breakfast? And Alex's responses were,
Yeah, I don't really eat breakfast all that often, and I don't drink coffee, so I'll be a
so
little boring.
yeah, well, just on that front, we'll skip to the good stuff and you'll redeem yourself. I'm positive of that. So I think the icebreaker question that we landed on is actually going to be much more beneficial, which is, what is the best and or worst advice you've ever received?
Yeah, I think one of the best advice I probably received, at least in relation to business, was the power of niching down, which we're going to actually talk about. And I'll probably mention later the first time I actually saw that firsthand. But it's a lesson that I've had to learn several times that the more you niche down, the more power and leverage you have in the marketplace, and especially when it comes from a marketing perspective. So, yeah, the power of picking an industry or a niche and really being an expert in a small pond rather than trying to be the biggest fish in a very large ocean.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And even speaking for myself, I can say that that's a very challenging process because when you're a skilled individual, you can apply that in a variety of ways, industries, niches. So how do you even get started? But you mentioned having done this yourself a few times. So can you kind of start with your story and experience of that?
Yeah, so I run Searchable, which is a digital marketing agency. We niche down in home services. I also own a second company called Connect Ideal, where we work with now like weight loss clinics and kind of med spas that are trying to do digital advertising and sometimes a little bit of SEO, search engine optimization. So that's kind of our main two niches: is a bigger, larger agency that helps with mid-size home service companies, plumbers, roofers, HVAC, things like that, and then usually a little bit smaller med spa slash weight loss clinic type niche. And so that was
That
kind
makes
of the history of where we started and the lessons around niching down. I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, but how we kind of got to those niches and understanding how to speak to that audience a little bit better.
Yeah. So before we kind of dive deep into why you picked those niches, because I'm sure you didn't wake up one day and say, I want to do marketing strategy for plumbers, or I want to do marketing strategy for fill in the blank here. Can you just give us a little bit more insight into why having a niche is important in the first place?
Yeah. So especially when you start out, it's really hard to kind of grasp that idea because you can do anything for anybody and you're just looking for a way to start making an income. So a lot of times when I speak to clients, not anymore because now it's home services, but in the past, you would speak to people or maybe fellow marketing or agency owners. They would take anybody that would write them a check, right? Literally, they'll do service for anybody because they're like, yeah, I can
Mm-hmm.
make it work for B2B SaaS. I can make it work for e-commerce businesses. I can, yes, your services can work. But when you think about the power of referrals, even, I remember the first time I heard this was from a fellow SEO and market industry leader. His name is Rand Fishkin, and he was talking about what the amount of times that businesses come to him asking for a referral. The people who have niched down, it's very easy to pair their industry with the person who does that very specific thing rather than the list of 20 friends that are all just generic consultants. He's like, how do I easily just refer that and make sure I'm being fair to all the people that I think do a good job. So when somebody is extremely good at one specific thing and somebody comes with that problem, it's easy to think, oh yeah, I know exactly who you should go to for that solution.
Yeah.
And so there's that power in it from a referral perspective. But the bigger part comes from the brand that you're able to build and the pretty much being an industry leader from a marketing perspective. The way you talk to your audience, the words you're choosing, your copy, the ads you run, that all gets way more powerful and specific when you have a niche and you actually really understand that niche.
That makes sense. And I'm just from experience and working with business owners, it's pretty common to find yourself in the trap of, I need revenue, so I'm going to say yes to everything. And then you end up spreading yourself thin. And yes, you may be able to help everyone, but I'm guessing if you niche down, you can help them even more because that's your expertise, right? You get that much more time to really build up yourself for that industry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I get it. Like at the end of the day, you have to pay bills, and you got rent or a mortgage or what have it. So there's a balance in the beginning where obviously people are going to take some of the first jobs. I'm actually a pretty big proponent of, depending on the industry, but doing free work, proving, especially if you're brand new, prove that you can do the service, or you can sell the product, or it's actually going to get the result that you're gonna do. So sometimes offering either a lower ticket offer that you can do for free, or sometimes even doing something for free that other people are used to paying for, to show that you're as good as you say you are, and just really build that trust and authority. And then you can also use that for content marketing, right? So especially if it's a service-based thing, you can do some sort of free work or project, and you can get as much of the testimonials or case study, the before and after. Again, this depends on what the service is, obviously, but and use that in your marketing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an easier way to kind of start. But when you're thinking about the power of a niche, you have a lot more leverage in a conversation when you can say, I've taken somebody that looks like you, talks like you, acts like you, and has the same type of business from A to Z, versus, yeah, I've worked with, businesses in general, so that's coming at least from the marketing agency perspective, but you can throw any business in there and kind of repeat that same pattern.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'd imagine if someone's, I mean, now with the internet, the buyer's in the driver's seat, we have so much at our fingertips, so many resources at our fingertips to do the research. And so if we're just searching for SEO, I'm guessing you're going to come up with hundreds of options. But if it's SEO, marketing strategy for plumbers in the Pacific Northwest, or, just down the funnel, I'm guessing that helps your rankings as well. Is that a factor in
Yeah,
niching
yeah,
down?
absolutely. Yeah, and even in the SEO industry, and I won't go too far into this because some of your audience probably won't find it too interesting, but the there's a lot of nuance and differences even in the type of SEO that you are. So like in my specific case, we do a lot of local SEO, so we're helping businesses that serve some sort of local demographic. There are some overlapping factors and ranking kind of factors there, but for the most part, there's completely different algorithms from an organic perspective to a local perspective. If you're a very large enterprise media client, we had a conference this week, and if you're talking to somebody, a multi-billion-dollar company or one of the Fortune 100 or 500 companies, they have a very different SEO strategy and playbook that they can run than if you're talking to, a $5 million a year HVAC company that is based out of a couple locations. That's a completely different playbook and angle and approach they're going to have to how they present themselves online and how they get leads, versus somebody else who has a lot of different kind of levers to pull on and maybe is serving a nationwide audience. So it really depends on kind of where you're coming from and what your goals are.
Got it. Well, it's interesting to me, so maybe we'll talk about that later. But back to that broader topic of the niche, what are some strategies or ways that someone can even start identifying what they want their niche to be and potentially what's even financially feasible for them?
Yeah. So one of the easiest ways is, if you own a business and you are servicing clients in some way, you obviously have the top 10% or 20% of clients that are generally paying the most or large majority of your bills. Not always, but a lot of times, more often than not, if you have it niched down, you have a couple clients that you they're either more profitable clients, or they pay you more, or perhaps you actually just do better work for them. You get a better results. Start there, because at the end of the day, if you're struggling to define your niche, look at who you know you can serve well. And we all have these inherent kind of backgrounds that are a little more nuanced and different, sometimes based off of the careers or jobs that our parents used to have. We inherently just have a little more experience in certain industries. Someone whose parents are a doctor, that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to go perform medical procedures, but they just have a lot more background medical knowledge than the average person who didn't grow up with that type of family, right? And so thinking about what kind of life experiences have I had? What kind of overlaps or what type of businesses have I already serviced and done a great job for? Again, if you're in the service industry, that's a really good place to start. And that's kind of how we fell into it. So for example, in our case, when we niche down to home services, it comes into a couple different things in play. We've ran the playbook for home service companies over and over and over and gotten really great results. And I know that I can take a roofing company from $3 million a year to $10 million a year over the course of, a year and a half or 2 years, or
It's
depending on how
incredible.
aggressive they're wanting to be.
Well, and you
And that's a
have the case
playbook that
study
we've,
for it too,
yeah,
which is, I'm sure, why that niche helps you find more customers, more clients.
yeah, exactly. And so that's a playbook that we've run over and over. And then for me, the other side of it was just in terms of how the market's changing, how the search kind of environment is changing online with AI and AI overviews. There's a lot of things that are kind of changing from Google to Bing to OpenAI, like all these things are coming out. And at the end of the day, home services is still going to be a fairly focused transactional type place where I know, at least in our case, you're not going to go to TikTok to find a roofing company when your roof is leaking, right? You're still going to kind of go to search. And even if it changes the platform, the actual model of how you acquire clients is still going to be the same, more or less. And so I knew that it was a kind of a reliable for the next couple of years of, despite all the changes, of a playbook that we can continue to run and get good success. And so it's a space that I obviously wanted to stay focused on. And the more you learn about your target demographic, which in our case might be a plumbing owner or plumbing business owner, I understand how they want to market to their audience and how they want to wrap their vans and how many people should be allocated per their schedule, and all these little nuanced things that you can actually throw into your content marketing or throw into your education. They get really specific to understand that they're not just another generic person who's spitting out something that they could have Googled themselves.
Yeah. Well, I know you've told me before, when you're implementing marketing strategy, whether it's SEO or whatever methods you might use, of course, depending on your client, you're able to troubleshoot what needs tweaking better because you know what's worked before and you can see what's not working for them in an efficient amount of time. So then they're not burning money on it either, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It seems like that would make you a more valuable partner for your client too, rather than just this transactional relationship that's easily replaced.
Yeah, and that's kind of the main point of this exercise, and the real benefit of niching down is how do I provide the most amount of value to either the marketplace or to my target demographic. And the reality is, I came from an agency that when I first started out in my career in SEO and just digital marketing, it was a dental marketing agency. They worked explicitly with dentists in the U.S. doing a very specific set of services, right? And so that niche, you just have so much more power because when a dentist is looking for a variety of marketing agencies to choose from, the one that has worked with hundreds and hundreds of other dentists that look and act like them and have the same problems and have the same issues and have resolved them in similar ways, that has a lot more power and weight to it rather than marketing agency number 123 that also services a personal injury attorney and then a locksmith and then also a B2B SaaS company. And so there's a power in just understanding the market and understanding your demographic and getting really, really specific, and how do we serve them better and how do I understand their problems better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm definitely taking notes because I know we need to niche down ourselves in our business, so that this is good for me as well. Are there any? I mean, this all sounds like a lot of work, sure, but it's worth it. Um, are there any risks? Are there any? Is there any downside to niching down?
Yes and no. So the only risk would really be in the the choice of the industry, of whether or not it's growing or shrinking. So I can think of a story that was told by another entrepreneur. I can't remember who it that had this type of business, but they were also in the, I believe, marketing space or maybe just advertising space for newspapers, and they were doing a very good job as an entrepreneur. Their business was potentially could be growing, and they were making a lot of effort, but they were still shrinking year after year slowly, even though they were taking up majority of the market share, and they were struggling to figure out what was going on. they serve newspapers. It was a dying industry that was slowly shrinking by 25% every single year. And so their clients were literally disappearing. And so that's a case where picking that niche was a mistake, and there was a downside, not because of niching down, but just because literally the market was shrinking.
Yeah.
And so thinking about that a little bit in the same way that we niche down into home services, because there were certain other industries that, while they may still have a marketplace for search, that search landscape is going to change a lot over the next 6, 12, 18 months, even a couple of years, to the point where their strategy might be not focused on top of the funnel, middle of the funnel content as much as a different business. And so just thinking about what's a little bit more, AI proof if you're in some of those places, what might have a little bit more job security, what's a growing marketplace. So looking at number of, if you're servicing other businesses or servicing other customers, is it a growing or shrinking demand? And so thinking about that when we're niching down can help. But the other reality is if there's other people servicing that niche, there's demand for it. And so you don't have to feel too bad about picking your niche. I remember at the very beginning, I struggled a lot with, I know I could do anything, and I felt like I was limiting myself by niching down. And it wasn't until the first time I actually got to see this was in our sister company, where we service weight loss clinics. And instead of just servicing weight loss clinics in general or servicing health spas in general, we went even more down the market, and we serviced a very specific brand of weight loss clinics. And by doing that, we were able to reach out to them and choose the type of demographic that we knew would work. What size were they? How many employees did they have? How many dieters did they have? And after doing that, we were able to get about 35% of all of those existing businesses to work with us within the first 8 to 10 months. And so that's the power of niching down, because when we were able to reach out and speak with these business owners, we had very, very hyper specific conversations that nobody else in the marketplace would ever have, because nobody understood them as well as we did, because we niche down to the oomph degree, So there's really power in that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, if something's working, do more of it. And then once you've tapped that out, then just adjust it a little bit and do more of that, right? I think that's an Alex Hormozy thing too,
Yeah.
which I know we both follow. Lots of good tips there. But that can also be its own episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then after you do that, there's a way to go up market, down market, side markets, and so there's ways to expand without having to change your whole system, right? So we eventually hit a point where after we grew to that niche, because we were so specific, we did actually eventually hit the kind of the critical mass point where we're no longer going to be able to grow, because there's literally not any more of that specific type of business. And so then we went up just one little bump, where now we service weight loss clinics a little bit more generically, but we still are very hyper focused in the niche. And so we know the struggles they have in the industry. We know the new drugs that are coming out. We understand that type of market and how to service that well. So that's just kind of an example of the power.
Well, I'm sure that answers a question that many will ask too, which is, okay, say I've tapped out the market. What's next? What do I do next? And so you're just leading into that of adjusting your parameters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a couple different ways you can go. You can go, like I said, up market, down market. You can go to the side too. So, for example, instead of a weight loss clinic, maybe it is like a med spa. So it's similar industry. It's kind of a shoulder niche, if you will, and things like that. And so there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Again, it's going to depend a little bit on what your service is. If you're, a marketing company, or if you're a, accounting firm, or what it might be, it's going to depend. I remember just speaking of Hormozy, he was just talking about somebody that he spoke with that did a very specific thing with their Instagram audience. They make content and they do insurance billing for registered dietitians. That is one very specific thing. And they take home over $1 million a year in profit from this very, very hyper specific niche. Wild. So there's a lot of power in being able to service a very segmented, specific audience and niching down, because you are the expert in that space. And then as you grow, you can roll out into new spaces, or at least increase the radius of that industry.
Yeah, no, I'm sold. There's definitely value there. I really liked that the newspaper anecdote, because you could be doing everything right, but the industry that you're targeting is shrinking. So, and that's something you have zero control over. So when someone's deciding on a niche, how do they make sure that that niche is viable and financially stable, or has potential to be profitable?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things that you can do around just market research. The easiest way is obviously you can use Google to get a lot of these answers for the most part. You can search how many of the types of customers or clients there are. You can search sometimes even seeing, how big of the industry is. You always hear like weight loss is a whatever, $45 billion industry. You can search
Mm-hmm.
those types of things in Google to see just how large those spaces are in terms of revenue, whether it is like, oh, I worked exclusively with chiropractors or whatever. You can see whether that industry is growing or shrinking. And then also the different types of problems that those businesses kind of experience. So there's obviously going to be a subset of services that a chiropractor might need, or a weight loss clinic, or a cosmetic dentist, or what have you. So there's a lot of benefit in understanding that. The other thing that can help understanding your demographic and getting a little more tactical here, there's a lot of tools out there you can use. One of my favorite one is SparkToro. That tells you a
How do
lot
you
about
spell
your
that?
audience. Yeah. So Spark, SparkToro. So SparkToro,
Got it.
founder of Rand Fishkin, originally from Moz, and then he started this company. Does a lot with audience demographics, so you can see anybody. I think the way their tool works is that essentially it scours the internet and social profiles and LinkedIn and Twitter and X and all the various social platforms. And anybody that uses certain words or terminologies or job titles in their descriptions or their profiles, it also then matches to where they live online and what they do. So
Oh,
anybody, for
interesting.
example, who has, let's say they have I'm going to keep using plumbing business owner as their
Mhm.
job title in LinkedIn. It can match their name and account information across their profiles, and then see where do they live online. Not that specific person, but people who look like that.
Yeah.
So what kind of podcasts do they listen to? What websites do they visit? What other social platforms are they most frequently on? And then you can start to understand, okay, this is a good idea of what my audience insights actually look like. Here's how they talk. Here's what they talk about. Here's the things they're interested in. And then that can start to shape the way that you communicate in your marketing, in your ads, in your content efforts, things like that. So it's definitely worth the time to understand your audience well. But the best way, honestly, is talking to your audience. Like the amount of times that I hear business owners want to just skip over the fact of when's the last time you've actually just asked some of these questions to your customers.
Yeah.
You get a lot of insights just by asking the question. And so we've done this for clients in the past where we'll do some audience research and we find out some really interesting things that uh, people who were selling services or products that they thought their customers loved turned out they didn't really love them all that much. And so that gives you some really insightful information of, hey, we thought this was a problem. Turns out in our market, this actually isn't as big of a problem as we thought it was. And we either need to change it a bit or make it a lot better, depending on what it was. So those insights are invaluable but it takes, like you said, it takes work and effort to uncover that a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, the power of conversation, really, because I talk to a lot of our business owners, our clients, and then just friends, obviously. And yeah, what you perceive to be the problem or the success typically is not. There's completely different things keeping them up at night than what you first thought. One tool, I'm gonna look at SparkToro because that sounds really interesting. I haven't heard or used it before. Oftentimes, what we do to look at industry insights is pulling reports on vertical IQ. I think it's like $100 a report, or unlimited reports for $150 a month. So if you're really exploring figuring out what your industry is doing, the one that you're targeting, you might as well just do a month or two of the unlimited reports. But it's like 20 to 30 pages of just here's where it's been over the last decade. Here's what the trends are looking like going forward. Here's the common issues. I mean, it's a very in-depth report, and it's been really helpful for us when we're doing strategic planning with our clients. But I like the idea of using it in the sales process to really narrow down and figure out the most viable niche.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and like you said, it kind of rolls over into every facet of your business. So
Mm-hmm.
it affects the way that you advertise and market yourself. It affects your sales process, the types of conversations you have, the questions you might ask. It probably, no doubt, affect the actual deliverables and either the product or service that you sell and the way you sell it. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of benefit from that, and you can look at it. I think a lot of times people assume this is in the service space, but you can look at products. There's a ton of different products out there that still niche down to certain types of audiences,
Mm-hmm.
whether they do that intentionally or not. You can look at the beer industry, and you can think about, like, there's very certain. Obviously, there is some overlap, but there's definitely some brands of different alcoholic beverages that are going to serve certain types of demographics. You know, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have demographics that live in certain states or have different political views or have different social issues or whatever that tend to skew towards, more often than not, a couple different brands.
Mm-hmm.
People have their own favorite brands around, like Pepsi and Coke and all these different things. And so there's these inherent niches even at very large scale, or at least demographic targeting. Um, and most of us are not at that level yet, right? We're not multi-billion-dollar companies that have the power to do giant TV and Super Bowl ads and things along those lines. And so we got to play at a much smaller level and understand what niche can I serve extremely well and where can I be the best,
Mm-hmm.
and the best business service provider or product in this space, and then do that really, really well. And if you can, anyone who has that focus, I have seen that win more times than I can count. And it's
Yeah.
always the power of niching down.
Really good advice. Well, before we close out, I was going to ask you if you have any final tips for business owners, but that was a pretty good one. So tell me if you have any more, but otherwise I'll close us out.
Yeah, I will say one final one, just in terms of marketing and content marketing, is use that information and leverage that in your ads, leverage that in your content marketing. So even the way that, and you can test this, but as an example, if you're serving a specific type of business owner or a specific type of client, looking, acting, dressing that same type of way is going to come across very differently. So, for example, in some of our home service spaces, the way I might dress in an ad talking to a roofing company is going to be very different than if I was servicing large VC, backed hedge funds or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there wouldn't be VC backed, but you know what I mean. Whether it's an enterprise, you're going to wear a suit or something, or the other one's going to be much more down to earth and blue collar. And so
Yes.
even the type of people we use in our advertisements, the way we talk, the verbiage, the type of deliverables that we ship out, that all can change based off of understanding our audience better and not being too generic there. So being our true self, but also talking to the audience in the way that it's going to be well received, is going
Yeah.
to be super helpful.
No, that's a very good point, is making sure that you kind of match the tune that your client needs so that they're receptive to, what you're sharing in your partnership, and so that they feel comfortable, because I don't think we've niched down quite as much as you have, but I do know we want long-term relationships with our clients. We want them to be comfortable in conversation with us. So no, we're not wearing the power suit, the tie. We're, a little business casual so that they get that more comfortable feeling when they're talking to you. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and you want to be authentic throughout all that. That doesn't mean put on a show or kind of
No.
posture in any way, because I think people are really good at seeing through all of that. But there's a balance where we still want to act in a way and talk in the way that is most appealing to the target demographic, and making sure we're servicing them well. And inherently, we probably are actually that way if we're niching down. So
Yeah.
there's some power in that.
Good tips. Thank you. Well, if
Yeah.
any of our listeners want to contact you, follow you, find you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so staysearchable.com. We used to be Ratynski Digital, but I didn't want anyone to have to say or spell my last name. So we're searchable now. It's staysearchable.com. You can reach out. We'll do a free website audit for anybody who's interested in kind of the state of a marketing audit, which generally has some of the website in there. But give you assessment on what's the state of your website, your search. So if you're anybody who's a home service company, or if you're kind of a med spa weight loss clinic, we have two different service options for you. So feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. And I will add that to the show notes as well. Well, to close us out, again, your guest tonight or today was Alex Ratynski from Searchable. I'm your host, Lara Cooper. This is The Accelerator. And until next time.